you didn't want to be too skinny, but you had to be skinny. People openly made sure you know you're fat. And if you were too skinny, they teach you about breaking in half. You get made fun of so badly for acne. It's pitiful, and not just by outsiders in the community, by your parents. For the kids, we would usually do 6. For the adults, we would do maybe 3 or 4 in one bathwater before we could change it. Like for the little kids, imagine how many of them pee in that bathwater.
No.
Oh, I don't want this. I just don't want this. I don't want to work on the sawmill. I don't want to get baptized. Like, I don't like this anymore. I can't commit suicide. No, I don't want that because I want to live. But the only other option was leaving the Amish. And I'm like, leaving the Amish is just wrong. That's wrong. I'm going to hell if I do that.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow. What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey guys, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only on those podcast platforms and you would prefer to see our faces and our guests' lovely attire today, please go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. It's the best way to support the show, really. Any way that you interact with the post tells the algorithm it wants more people to see it. And so we are able to get more exposure on our guests who are bravely coming on and sharing their stories. They are real people, and it means so much to us when you leave those words of encouragement for them. So today's guest, when we put out a call to you guys of who do you want to see, a couple of you recommended her. And so I was so excited to find her channel. She talks about Amish recipes and homemade cooking, and everything looks so amazing. And I wish I had the time to do all of the amazing things that she's doing over there. But today we're talking about her upbringing in the Swartzentruber Amish. Thank you so much for joining us, Lovina Zook.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And you're very welcome. And thank you for pronouncing my name right.
I was trying so hard. I'm like, I need to make sure I say this right. Lovina Zook.
Yeah, you got it.
So we were just talking off camera because I was like, okay, what name are we using? Your maiden name or your married name? And you said that your husband also grew up in a very strict Swartzentruber group. And so that's how they would pronounce it in the Swartzentruber, Zook. But English people say Zook. So we're going with Zook because that's the right way.
Yeah.
And maybe we can get him on to share his story as well so we can get a full perspective of you and your life.
I think that would be amazing.
Yeah. So let's start with you. This is your second interview telling your story, and I'm excited to get into all of the details. I don't know much of the details, and so I'm going to be learning right along with the audience here. So let's just start with your specific settlement, where in the world it was, and then we'll give everyone an idea of some of the rules and things that you had to live by.
The specific settlement I grew up in, the one I was born in, was in South Central Minnesota. I was born into a kind of a big community, and a community is just a bunch of Amish all living together, and there's different, depending on how big the community is, they have to split the community in different churches so each church doesn't get too big, because they have limits on how big their church can be because they have their churches in their homes. So I was born into that community, but when I was 2 years old, like just before I turned 2 years old, my parents and several other couples from that community moved about 4.5 hours south, which put them exactly on the Iowa and Missouri state line. And they started a new community, and that's where I grew up. So when they moved down there, my parents moved on the Missouri side, and then they lived there until I was 10. And then they moved 4 miles north, which put them on the Iowa side. So anytime someone asks, where do you grow up? I say Iowa and Missouri, because I spent half my childhood in Missouri and half in Iowa, so I can't just say one, because I didn't just grow up in Iowa, but I also didn't just grow up in Missouri, because I was not full grown when we moved to Iowa. So that's where the community was located, and that's where I grew up, in the Midwest, middle of nowhere, out in the sticks. Even to this day, if I go to that area, my cell phone doesn't work. If you don't have maps downloaded, you have no hopes of getting anywhere unless you know the area. So.
And you said that your parents started their own community. So how many families were there? That sounds really intimate and small.
It is very intimate. So it was my parents, was me and my one younger sister and one older brother. So my parents was 3 kids. There was the guy and his wife that became a bishop later on. He wasn't a bishop, like they didn't have a bishop anybody when it started. So it was my parents and I think my parents and 3 other couples. It was my parents, my dad's, 2 of my dad's second cousins, and then 2 of my dad's third cousins. So it was my parents and 4. So it was like 5, and they all live within a 3-mile radius of each other. So it was very close together. It expanded and it's bigger now. It's now like a 10-mile radius, I'd say. Yeah, it is probably a 10-mile radius now. But when it started, it was so small, so few people.
How does it work when they start their own community and there needs to be leadership or, like you were saying, the bishop? How do they decide who
Yeah.
becomes that or who's qualified for that?
So in that case, since they had no bishop or minister, one of the bishops from the community where they came from, they all came from the same community. They decided, one of the bishops up from Minnesota decided they also want to move down there. So that immediately solved their bishop problem because each church needs their own bishop. And when someone moves from one community and starts their own, they're starting a community and a new church. Like they're starting a new church where they can have rules that's slightly different. Not like vastly different rules, but they can slightly differ a little bit. So they need their own bishop. So when that guy the bishop from Minnesota decided to move down, that immediately solved their bishop problem. If he wouldn't have decided to do that, they would have needed to use a bishop, like follow the same rules as the church in Minnesota. So they would have had to have the same bishop as the church in Minnesota, and they would have had to continue to follow those rules. But because they had the bishop in their own community, now all they needed was a minister, because for each church, they need a bishop, at least one minister, preferably 2, and a deacon. So they had their bishop. They elected a minister, which they do by lots, like they do by votes, basically, or throw a lot. It's a whole system. So they elected one minister, and then they elected a deacon, which was my dad, and then they elected another minister. So out of the 5 families that moved down right away, my dad and 2 of the others, my dad was a deacon and 2 of the others were ministers. So out of those 5, 3 of them were in the leadership group. So over half of them were leaders.
Yeah, that's
And the
so
others
interesting.
were just following. So
And I'm glad we started talking about this early because I also wanted to bring up anytime we talk about the Amish, I think it's important, and I want your opinion on this, your disclaimer that we're not trying to blanket statement every single Amish person out there because the settlements vary so greatly. And
yes.
while there are certain things, like you said, that are basically the same, they all have their own individual governing body. There is no one head over the Amish, over everybody, like there is with Mormonism, for example. So there are so many variances. And so when we're talking today, we're speaking specifically about the group that you were raised in and the rules that came with that.
The Swartzentruber Amish group. Among most Swartzentruber Amish, most rules are pretty similar. So my husband also grew up in a Swartzentruber Amish community. I know they could not have things we could have. So we, for instance, could have headlights, like the headlamps with straps. I don't think they could have those. Or if they can now, I'm not sure if they could, like a couple years ago, because they changed their rules evolve and evolve. They can only use certain types of fabric for their dresses, and their fabric types evolve as time goes on and they get introduced to new fabrics. They still have to be like solid print, but they might be like, this is broadcloth. They might be able to use like spring melange or polyester or like poplina. I know my community, when I left, could only use broadcloth and poplina. But now, and it was becoming a debate, I loved spring melange fabric, but we couldn't have that. My church couldn't have that. I know 4 months after I left my community, they could have spring melange fabric. So it, like, just like that, it changed. When I left, it was not even in the debate. 4 months later, they had it. So it changes, like, they vote on it. The community votes on it. The majority gets their vote. So apparently a lot of the women probably wanted spring melange fabric, and the men probably didn't care much.
How does that make you feel? So, as a personal example, growing up Mormon, the garments were always pretty long, like the underclothes that you had to wear,
Mhm.
which forced you to be modest. And now they can have tank tops. And so when I grew up, I was
Yeah.
consistently shamed for showing even a little bit of shoulder. And it was a
Mhm.
big thing. And so I know that we obviously want churches to progress and not be so strict and I don't know, just change with the times, I guess. But then at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I could have worn tank tops my whole
Mhm.
childhood." So
Yeah.
how does it make you feel? Because I know in the Amish, it's even more of a big deal. Like if your hem is too short or too long, then you get rebuked for it. So how does that make you feel?
So when I left, one of the things I personally wanted, so I was a strict rule follower. My whole life, you ask anybody that knows me, everybody was shocked that I left the Amish. I hadn't told anybody. So I was a strict rule follower. Everybody says that. I was strict to the point of being a snob. And the one thing that I wanted that was against the rule was a spring melange dress. I wanted a dress made of spring melange fabric, and I couldn't have it because it was against the church rules. So when I left, and 4 months later, the way I found out was my mom. My mom was the one that was so like she was like, no, spring melange is against the rules, and no, but like people can't have that. Although there were like a couple girls in our community that did have it, they weren't supposed to, but they did have it. So my mom was always the one like, "No, like, it's anyway so slippery, like, it doesn't feel good, it makes you sweat and stuff." And she was so against it or acted like she was so against it. And 4 months after I left, they had come to I moved to Minnesota after I left, they had come to Minnesota to visit my grandparents. And I happened to be at my grandparents while they were there, and mom was wearing a spring melange dress. And I was like, What? You
What?
have a spring melange dress on?" And she's like, "Yeah, we can have that now." And I was like, "Well, that's a betrayal." Like,
Yeah, it's frustrating.
'cause I don't know, I wish I could wear whatever I want, but I felt like a little bit of a betrayal.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Well, the thing is, and
"Oh."
I try to get people to understand this who didn't grow up in high control groups, is it's not about the fabric. It's about the principle. It's about the fact that
Yeah.
you couldn't do it before, not just because some guy decided, it was because it would make God upset with you. It was a sin.
Mhm.
It's more than just the fabric, it's the
Yeah.
principle behind it. And so when they change things willy-nilly, you're like, "Well, did it even matter to begin with?"
I know. So what my church uses to get away from that excuse is in the Bible, it says if a church agrees on something, it's right. I don't know where they find that in the Bible. I know there's like some principle of that in the Bible. Like if a group of you, is it the Bible? Wait a minute. I'm
I
getting
don't know.
confused. Is it the Bible or is it the rule book? I feel like it's the rule book that if the whole church agrees on it, then it's good. Like it's not, God doesn't care. And they
Interesting.
use that for things that actually go against, like things that shouldn't happen
Like
according to the
what?
Bible. They're dating, for instance,
Okay, let's
the way
talk
they
about it.
date. So obviously the Bible says no sleeping together till you're married. I have no problem with that. They agree with that. They say no sleeping together until you're married. But it also says to flee temptation, to not tempt yourself with it. Well, they're dating. They stick the couple together. The only way my community dates is by having the two teenagers that are dating. They get to see each other every other Saturday night, only during the night at 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. The boyfriend comes over to the girlfriend's house. She still lives with her parents. He goes up to her room by himself, and they stay there until the next morning at 4 o'clock in the same bed,
Right.
usually in the dark. And that is how they date. And I'm like, I had a boyfriend for 10 months when I was Amish. I was so uncomfortable. And my parents don't lock doors. So one night I wanted to break up with him and he didn't want to break up. Like, so one night I locked the door so he couldn't get in, but my parents unlocked it and he got in anyways.
Oh,
So
Yeah, I heard about this dating ritual.
Just that is, I'm assuming if I could ask God one question with a direct answer, and I would ask him if that's right, I doubted that he would say yes.
Well, I think the whole thing is it's just so contradictory because from our other interviews, especially with one of our guests, Lizzie, love you out there if you're watching. She was from
Mm-hmm.
Swartzentruber. Behind Blue Curtains is her book, and she talked about that dating ritual, but then at the same time, they're not allowed to know anything about their anatomy, about
I
sex, about
know.
anything. But and it's just like, no, 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 everything's forbidden to where you can't even show your hair type of rules because it's
Mm-hmm.
too tempting. But then you're putting teenagers in the same bed at night. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
I know. So the hair thing, the way I have my hair up right now, it had to be up like that at all times unless I was washing it and drying it. And they air dry their hair, so it would take like an hour or so to air dry it if it was nice and windy outside. But the only time I could have it down was when I was washing it and drying it. Otherwise, it had to be up 24/7, 365. Like during the night, it stayed up. We were not allowed to let our hair down or take our caps off during the night. So
Did that give you headaches?
it did. I suffered from migraines ever since I was 4 years old, up until I left the Amish.
Whoa.
They vanished. Miraculously, just poof, they were gone.
Is that when you had to start wearing your hair back was for?
No, well, okay, when your hair is always back. By the time I think I was around a year old, by the time your hair is long enough to braid it, they braid it, they have braids going, they part it in the middle, braid it down like to your face, to your head, as close as they can, as tight as they can. Braid it, bring it back, and tie the braids in the back. Like tie them. They braid yarn into it so they can tie them in the back, and that is how your hair is up until you're 8 to 9 years old, and then you start putting it up like this. So my hair, my whole life was up, like constricted up on my head.
So, for those who aren't familiar, can you talk about why the hair thing is so important to the Amish, to your specific community?
They believe in, like in the Bible, where Paul says for women to cover their hair. I can't remember specifically how the verse is worded, but it says to cover your hair. Like a woman should cover their hair. And they take that very literally, and they think it applies to us in today's world. Now, if I were to explain to them why it doesn't, I would say when Paul wrote that letter to the church, he was talking about prostitutes. Back the church he was talking to, church he was writing the letter to, if a woman went out with the hair uncovered, it was to signify that she's a prostitute. So the only way to tell a difference between women back then was if they had their hair covered or uncovered. If it was uncovered, they were a prostitute. If it was covered, they were not a prostitute. So Paul, of course, recommended if a woman is a Christian to cover your hair. And they have no clue that that's what it means because they don't read any context in the Bible. They don't do any, they read the words as if the Bible was written directly to them, to their church, when it was not. The Bible was written for them, not to them. So that's why I don't have a problem walking around with my hair uncovered. Now I know when I first left the Amish, I was like, well, the verse says, like, am I just completely going against God's word? And I was like, so many Christians in today's world don't cover their hair. Let me do some digging. And that's what I found. It's like he wasn't even talking to us. He
Yeah.
was talking to prostitutes. So
Can you talk about the meaning that your church gave as far as, well, women have to cover their hair because, or whatever it was that they told you?
your hair is your honor, is how they explained the woman has to cover her honor on top of her head. They like to say "dek de haupt," which means cover your head, which it's a whole, oh, it's so deep. Oh my gosh.
But in your own home, though, in your own home when you're sleeping, why does that still
I
apply?
know. I don't know. I have no clue why they were so strict because I know other girls in our community didn't have to cover. I think it goes from parent to parent.
Okay.
Because I know some of my friends didn't have to have their hair covered when sleeping, but we did. I don't know, mom always just said, keep your caps on, keep your hair covered. So that was one of the first things I did after leaving. I let my hair down. It felt so weird. It felt so weird. I was still in my Amish outfit, but I had my hair down and it felt weird.
Yeah. And for those who are just listening, she's wearing her full Amish attire right now. So that's why I said,
Yes.
come over to YouTube so you can actually see it. So let's talk about your family unit specifically. You ended up being one of 13 children, which, and you were the oldest, second to oldest, the oldest daughter.
Yes.
So let's talk about that family unit and what it was like growing up in such a big family.
I liked it. I often wonder if I liked it because it was my life or if I liked it because I actually like it.
Yeah.
I love kids. I love kids to death. And I love baking. So baking and cooking. Sometimes because they bake and cook every meal, sometimes it got so tiring. You always have to cook. You always have to make sure there's stuff there. It, of course, got very tiring. And taking care of the kids, sometimes, no, not just sometimes, the older I get, the more often it happened. I was like, once I'm on my own, I'm just gonna sleep because I was always tired. I was basically, I always say I was the manager of the house. And it was like I was the manager, mom was the owner because dad was at work. So
Okay.
mom was the ultimate decision stamper. Like, say I would need groceries, and we had our own neighbors had the Bulkwood grocery store, which a lot of Amish do. Say I would need groceries, and I would want one of my little siblings to run across the pasture and go get groceries, which was a treat to just get away from home, get groceries, like a little stuff, like maybe a pack of baking powder. That was a treat. So the little kids would always fight for who got to go. And we would send them as young as 5 years old. We would send them over there for groceries because it was just across the pasture. They didn't have to go on any public roads. That was a decision that normally the mom in the household would make. But I, as I grew older, made those decisions. So I would send them across the pasture, get the baking powder and stuff. But because we were getting baking powder, we did obviously have to pay for it. I would have to ask mom if they should we just had a bill that they would put it on, and then later mom and dad would pay it. So I would usually just tell mom, hey, they're going to go get groceries. We're going to just put them on the bill. She'd be like, fine, go. Now, something that mom would have to make a decision about would be, say I wanted to get fabric for a new dress. That's not just a small purchase. That's like $40. So I would want to go to the fabric store and get fabric. And I'd be like, Mom, can I go to the fabric store and get fabric? And then she had to say of yes or no. Usually it was yes because I was so involved in making decisions for everything, and I rarely asked for something unless I needed it. So she would usually say yes, but otherwise I was the manager and she was the owner. She was the final decision maker, but I was the instigator, if that makes sense. So I was considered mom number 2 my whole life.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for a kid.
I didn't mind it, except I was tired. I was tired. I never got attention from my parents for myself. If you have that many kids, you can't really give each one attention. They get yelled at, get told what to do, and that's about the only attention you get. So whenever I daydreamed about something would happen to me so I get attention, so I often dreamed, like, I wish I would break a bone so someone would finally pay attention to me. I did break a bone. I broke my arm when I was 11. I was sledding. I broke my arm, and I got attention, like fixed it and everything. Took me to the hospital, fixed it and everything, and it was fine. But it didn't last long. I still had to do my work and stuff, even though I had a broken arm. It was in a cast. I still had to do my work as much as I was able to with one arm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't really last long. Not enough to satisfy my attention deprived little heart.
Oh.
So after that happened, I was like, I wish something worse. I wish I would get kidnapped. Maybe then they would pay
Oh
attention.
no.
So and I know it happens a lot within Amish communities that kids like wish something would happen to them, or they try making
Oh, I
something.
thought you meant it happened a lot that people got kidnapped. I was like, hold on.
No,
Okay.
no, it happens sometimes. It has happened quite a bit more than the world probably realizes that Amish kids get kidnapped, and
What?
that spreads like wildfire if that happens, that an Amish kid gets kidnapped. Like, it is heartbreaking for everybody. I remember not long before I left the Amish, a girl from Lancaster, a teenage girl from Lancaster, got kidnapped, and I don't think they ever saw her again. So that was very heartbreaking. But it happens a lot in Amish communities that the kids wish something would happen, or they try making something happen so they get a little bit of attention.
Mm-hmm.
They just like they don't get any like personal attention, like, no, how are you doing, like, how are you growing and stuff. Like, it's just constant, like, do this, do that, follow these
Right.
rules, follow those rules. No, I don't know why, you just do it because that's how we've always done it. Just that type of thing, and it's not a healthy environment.
Do you think that it's mostly due to a large family, or do you think that it's because it's a large family within the Amish and your specific community? Did they tell you not to praise or love on your kids? I know some people I've spoken to said that they weren't really allowed to hug their parents, and so they never got any real affection. Was it that way for you, or was it just there were so many kids?
It was that way for me. I don't know any Amish who hug their kids or say "I love you."
Oh,
Even
man.
I don't know a lot of advanced Amish, but even the most advanced ones I know don't do that. And I never, ever heard "I love you" anywhere in the whole family my whole life growing up. Unless
Whoa.
it was from my grandma, who had left the Amish and learned different ways. But between my parents, never any show of affection, never, nothing. Literally nothing. You got laughed at for showing affection. And I don't think it was specifically because it was a large community or a large family, because I know large families that aren't Amish that show affection, that
Yeah.
have beautiful, stabilized family life. I think it was literally because they're Amish, they get laughed at for affection. My parents themselves have never been shown affection. Like, they have never heard their parents say "I love you." They've never been hugged. So I think it's like a generational thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's been taught it ever, so they can't teach it. You can't teach something you don't know. So I
Yeah.
think it goes back generations and generations.
That's so hard. I mean, but even though you've never had that modeled to you, a child is still going to crave connection. So the child still understands
Mhm.
that something's missing, even
Yes.
if everyone else
Yes.
doesn't do it. So what was that like for you growing up?
It was exhausting. Like I just said, like, you craved for something to happen so you get a little bit of attention. And then it did happen and you got some attention, but it didn't fill the hole the way you thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
After I left the Amish, I don't know how I remember very little from the first couple months after leaving the Amish. Like, I remember so little. I was in a state of depression. So I remember very little, but somewhere after I left the Amish, that switch kind of flipped, and I was like, it came naturally to show affection. I don't know where it was, but I think because I was so, like, I was not shown affection growing up, I was not modeled a proper relationship, like, I was not modeled a healthy relationship with affection and everything. I got into a lot of toxic, unhealthy relationships, like, that I should have never been in, and probably never would have been in if I would have known what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So I think I tried finding it in unhealthy relationships. And it gradually was people that have healed, like family that has healed. My uncle, the one with the podcast, is a big part of the reason I have healed and am healing. Because for at least 2.5 years after leaving the Amish, I was, no, I was like ashamed to talk about affection. I was ashamed to talk about pretty much anything that involved me personally, because you don't do that when you're Amish. You can't be proud of your accomplishments. You can't be proud of your loved ones, because pride is a sin. You can't have any like, oh wow moments, because say you were to draw a beautiful picture, freehand draw, which that's something most Amish love playing with. They're not allowed to be like professionals, but the kids at school love to like freehand drawing, where they don't just sketch it, like they try drawing a picture. If you do a really good job, which is very rare among the Amish, because they're not good, like they're just learning off of their own mind. So if you do a very good job, no matter how many other people say it looks good, you're supposed to say, no, it looks ugly. Yours looks so much better, because you can't be proud of your own work. If you look yourself in the mirror, you're supposed to say, I'm so ugly. I don't look good, because you can't say, I look good. You can't acknowledge that you're beautiful. That is completely out of the question among the Amish. Like, oh my gosh, the names you're called for doing that is atrocious. It's very toxic. I would not want if I ever have kids, I don't want them within 100 miles of anything like that.
Right. I would imagine
Like,
that would really affect your self-esteem, because even your inner
it
self-talk,
does.
you probably are trying to
Mhm.
mute yourself. But then at the same time, was
Yeah.
there any pressure to be beautiful or to present yourself in an attractive way?
Oh yeah, yeah. You didn't want to be fat. You had to be skinny. You didn't want to be too skinny, but you had to be skinny, because if you were fat, people openly made sure you're fat. And if you were too skinny, they tease you about breaking in half. Like, they're like, "Ooh, you're just a stick. You're gonna break in half. Maybe you should eat something." So I have a big frame. So I was always skinny for my frame, but I thought I was on the bigger side. But then I didn't know this when I was Amish. I didn't know the time of the month affected how you looked.
Mm.
But depending what time of the month it was, obviously I was skinnier. I wasn't bloated or anything. So I would be like, oh, you're breaking off. And then the exact opposite time of the month, when I was bloated, I was fat. Like, you're getting fat. So it was a very, very thin line between being fat or breaking apart. Like,
Oh,
it's impossible, because it's a human standard. It's impossible. So that was and acne. Oh my goodness. Acne, I know, is sometimes controllable, but they don't do any skincare, anything like that. Like, they don't know what skincare is. They never lotion their faces or anything. They wash them with cold water, rarely with soap. And so obviously teenagers, cycles change, hormones change, you get acne and stuff. You get made fun of so badly for acne. It's pitiful, and not just by outsiders in the community, by your parents and your siblings. Everybody chimes in and tells you how bad your acne is. It's traumatizing, is all I can say. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
When
not
you
a
don't have any
joke.
control over that or any sort of solution
You
offered
have
to you.
no, you resort to, I used to, when I was a kid, to try and get my acne to go away. I used to take cotton swabs and dip them in rubbing alcohol and wash my face with rubbing alcohol several times a day to try and keep keep the acne away.
Oh, no. Oh my
And I
gosh.
never moisturized it. I never used I didn't even know what face moisturizer was. So,
Let's talk about the hygiene standards, the personal hygiene within your community when it came to baths or showers or plumbing. What was the standard for yours?
so it goes from family to family. In our family, I know we were considered a little more fancy when it came to cleaning than some people. We didn't advertise it, but people kind of get the gist that you shower a lot. My family, like my teens, whatever, we sweat a lot. And I even still do to this day. So we would like not shower because we couldn't have a shower, but we would clean ourselves a lot. So during the summer, we would do it usually every day, the adults. Now, the little kids only got it once or twice a week. Probably during the summer, usually twice a week, they would get baths. And they would get actual baths. The adults, instead of doing a bath, I mean, because they couldn't do a shower, they would just take like a 2-gallon bucket of warm water and add some soap and then have a washcloth, and they would go out behind the house after it was dark or wherever. Because there were so many of us at once, we would have to like go in different spots. Anywhere that was dark, nobody could look out a window and see you. We would do it in the dark. Like, we wouldn't have a light. We'd just take the washcloths with the water and like wash ourselves off and then dump the water over us. And then we had like our shower for the day. And then every Saturday night we would take an actual bath in our bathtub. And we didn't have running hot water. We did have running cold water. It ran by gravity. Like, it wasn't run by an electrical force or anything. It was just gravity. So we had running cold water, but no running hot water. So for our hot water, we would take wood-fired kettle. It was like, I don't know, it was high. It was about twice as high as it was round. And then in the middle, it had a partition. And then at the bottom, you'd build your fire. At the top, you'd put your water in, and then it had a faucet. And it held like 50 gallons, I think. And it would take around, if you build a big fire, it would take around 30 minutes to get the water like hot. So we would then open the faucet, take it out by 5-gallon buckets, carry it over to the bathtub and make our water, like put the hot water in, add cold water until it's the right temperature. And then we would usually, per bath water, we would do 5 or 6 people per, depending on if they're kids or not. For the kids, we would usually do 6. For the adults, we would do maybe 3 or 4 in one bath water before we could change it. And then that is also the way we heated our water for our laundry. So we'd have to look at by 5-gallon buckets over to the laundry. And we did laundry twice a week. So you had to make sure you had enough. If we washed ourselves off every day during the summer, we had to do laundry more often. So we had clean clothes to wear again. So we would do our laundry in the mechanical gas motor run washer. We would rinse it, put it through the wringer, and then hang it out on the clothesline, dry it, and then take it in, iron it if it needed ironing, and then put it away and rinse and repeat with washing yourself and your laundry. So that was our hygiene. And then for teeth, skincare, brushing your teeth, hair, anything like that. The teeth, we as a family were supposed to brush our teeth every night before we went to bed. In the morning, we didn't have to worry about it. Our mom and dad didn't say anything about it. But every night before we went to bed, we were supposed to. Now, it did not happen nearly every night. So that was our hygiene for our mouth. Now, for our face, like I said, we usually just washed it. Like, say we would take our shower or whatever, we would just wash it with plain water, no soap. For our hair, the men usually wash their hair whenever they wash themselves off, because they have shorter hair, so it's easier to dry. Because they don't have hair dryers, they need to dry it all like just natural air, just let it hang, air dry. And so for the women, that was really hard because we had long hair. You didn't want to go to bed with wet hair because you had to like put the hair up. And if you put it up while it was still wet, it just was not a good mixture.
It would not dry.
So no, it would not dry at all. It would still be wet a day later. So for the women, they would usually have to plan on washing their hair. If they wanted to wash it more than they would wash it every Saturday. That was among the whole community. Every Amish person I know, the women wash their hair on Saturdays. But if they want to do it more on Saturdays, and they say they wanted to do it in the middle of the week on a Wednesday, they would have to wash it, make sure they have it washed in the afternoon or early evening so it can air dry by the time it's time to go to bed. And on Saturdays, they usually try washing it in the morning or early forenoon. That way it's like washed for the day, it's dry, they don't have to worry about it being wet in the evening. So it's kind of unhandy for the women just because of the whole hair thing. But that was our hygiene. We use shampoo, no conditioner, one wash. We never did double, what do they call them? Double cleansing. Yeah, we never did double shampooing. Whenever us women wash our hair, and usually men too, we had our basin. We call it a basin. It's like a sink, Yeah, it's like a sink. So you have your running cold water at the sink, but then you have two bowls, one for rinsing and one for washing. So you just bend over and duck your head in there. And then once you're done, you just wrap it in a towel and put it back until it's soaked up water, and then you just bring it down and let it air dry. So that's how we usually did our hair. Now the men wouldn't wrap it in a towel because theirs is so short.
Mm-hmm.
But I never looked forward to washing my hair ever when I was and also my hair is naturally curly. I didn't know that until like 3 years after I left the Amish. I realized, oh, if I do the right thing, my hair is probably curly. And I did like I didn't blow dry it. I just like rinsed it and then put in uh leave-in shampoo, and it's curly. My hair is curly. So that was a nice little find. I was so happy with that, which I shouldn't have been surprised because some of my younger sisters, if we took their braids out and washed their hair would be so beautifully curly. But I never thought my dad's hair is curly. I never thought about it because I didn't know your hair can be damaged enough that it doesn't curl on its own. So that was interesting
Yeah.
to find out.
Yeah, I mean, just all of that, and we won't spend a whole lot of time here because there's so much to get to, but just thinking about this is you doing hard labor, working on the farm, building
Mhm.
everything from scratch, cooking from scratch, sweating, long dresses, hair back in a cap. Like, I just imagine that you really needed that shower, and just thinking about getting in a
Uh-huh.
shower after a man who had been working on the farm or a tub and like getting into his tub water, I'm just like, oh, you would probably be like, I want to go after this person, not after that person. Because it seems like it would
So
make a difference. Would you even come out clean if
it
the
does. Uh-huh. I know sometimes I usually tried making sure I was the first one in the clean water because it was Saturday night. Whoever hurried and got it done first got the clean water. So I usually made sure I did that. And then if it was too dirty, I would probably be considered like a clean freak. Now,
Mhm.
I'm like a perfectionist at heart. If it was too dirty, I would make myself a bucket of clean water. And after I like scrubbed everything, I would just rinse myself with the clean water. So I
Yeah.
feel clean because, yes, the bath water gets nasty. And imagine how many, like for the little kids, imagine how many of them pee in that bath water.
No.
Oh,
Oh, no.
because I know
No,
little
no,
kids do
no.
that.
Okay, let's
Oh,
talk a little bit more about some of the harder things for you. Obviously, it's hard to live in this way, but I'm sure there were things that
yeah.
were eating at you a lot more that made you want to run away when you were 18. So, what are some of the main standout stories that you can remember?
I guess it is a story, but it is more like my want to do things. I have right now, like I have built a successful business since leaving the Amish that has been eating at me since I was a little kid. I dreamed of, I never thought of leaving the Amish. I never thought of leaving my community because I was such a stand up do gooder. I was like, I am staying here. I'm doing everything by the rules. But I was always daydreaming about how someday when I'm a mom and I'm grown up, I'm going to have a bakery and I'm going to bake so much stuff and I'm going to have this and this. Like I would have uh, an electric like fridge and or generator run fridge and stuff to keep myself cold because it's like that's the only way to do it. But the thing is we couldn't have generators. So I was already dreaming outside of my possibilities if I stayed
Mhm.
Amish. And I did that a lot with a lot of things. Like I would dream up how because when you're an Amish, your clothing matter a lot. Like if you have just almost too bright colored clothing, you're like, ooh, they're like fancy, they're bougie, like they're not quite following the rules. So, or to kids, that's what it looks like. Now to adults, I don't know what it looks like. But so I would be daydreaming about, oh, I'd have kids, and I would dress them in this color, and they would be this bougie. But it's like outside of the rules, just
Yeah.
enough that I'm like, later if I thought about it, I'm like, I'd get in trouble. Like somehow that would have to change. And and this comes back into I was not modeled a good relationship. I was the guy I was dating, oh my gosh, this is I always like I'm almost ashamed to admit this. Or it's almost wrong, but I'm like, it had to have some I don't think that anymore. It had to have something to do with the way I grew up. So innerly I always say it's not my fault I thought that. I
Okay.
used to think if I would marry the guy I was dating, because I didn't like him. I was dating him for principle's sake, to keep up with the expectations of everything. I always thought to myself, oh, we'd get married and we'd have a couple kids, and because I wanted kids. And I would have my own bakery, and then he would die in an accident, and then I would be happy.
Oh no.
Yes,
So you
that is
were fantasizing about being a widow just because you didn't really know what real
yes.
love could be or look like.
Because I was like, I want kids, but I don't want to be married to this guy. I know I don't want to be married to him, but I still want like the status of being a married woman, because if you're an old maid, which is a woman that's never been married in Amish, you're not looked at as like, you're not looked up to. You're not, how could I say, you're not
Respected?
considered respected. Yeah. You might be respected, but still you're always like in limbo because everybody gets married. So it's like you don't fit in at all. You don't fit in with the married women because every married woman has kids. You don't fit in with unmarried women because every unmarried woman is young. Like she's way younger than you are. So I was fantasizing about having the status of being a married woman, having kids, but not having a husband, because I didn't want him for a husband. I didn't want a husband because I wanted to be able to do these things. And I knew if I had a husband, I wouldn't, because my husband would have to be the one working and all that stuff. So it was very twisted, but that is just how I fantasized. And like I said, I never dreamed of leaving the Amish. I was like, I was going to be Amish my whole life, but everything I dreamed of doing while I was Amish was always a little bit outside of what I was actually allowed to do.
What was the average age to get married? Because I'm wondering how old you would have to be to earn the badge of old maid.
The average age of getting married was usually between 20 and 22. Because by the time you were 23 years old, if you didn't have a boyfriend by the time you were 23 years old, like if you didn't have a serious long-term boyfriend, then you would be just etching into the old maid hole. So if I would have been 24 and not married without a boyfriend, I would have been like, oh, she's an old maid.
Oh
Because
my
most girls
gosh.
don't reach 22 without getting married. So, or without at least like having a boyfriend that people expect her to get married to.
Yeah. I got married when I was 32. What would I be considered? I got married at 32.
A very old maid, and you'll be lucky if you get a widower, because
Oh
there's
my
not many
gosh.
bachelors either. So if you want to get, I know my Amish ex has 3 aunts that were old maids. They were in their 50s. 2 of them are still not married, but one of them was in their 50s. They married my great aunt's father-in-law. After my great aunt's mother-in-law died, they married my great aunt's father-in-law, and he was almost 70 and she was 50. So you're very lucky if you get anybody your own age, because the bachelors are just as rare as the old maids. Like everybody gets
Whoa.
married. Now, bachelor is looked at a lot more, I would say it's a lot more tolerated than an old maid, because a bachelor's like, you're a guy, you can like take care of yourself and you can do your own thing. But it's still not, you still don't really have a place to fit in.
Another question. Your community, you said pretty much everyone was related to you. Was it expected or normalized to be dating your own cousins?
Oh yeah, not first cousins. I didn't have any first cousins in my community because most of my aunts and uncles aren't even Amish anymore. But all of the kids in my community were second cousins. And yes, it was highly expected and even pushed at to marry them
Oh, wow.
all my life. So that was never, the guy I dated for 10 months was my second cousin, and I never thought of that. So yeah.
Yeah. So, another question, and if this doesn't apply to you, we can move on. It seems like in a lot of the communities with the people that we've interviewed before, there tends to be a lot of sexual repression without the sex education or just the knowledge of your own anatomy that can lead
Mhm.
to other things going on between siblings or between parents or between, these adults and children without this healthy expression of sex or even affection. Is that something that you noticed in your community?
Not when I was older. Not when I was. I didn't notice it in my community. I would say when I was older. When I was, let's say 4 or 5 years old, I know I was involved in me and like some of the other little kids. I never expected or never experienced it with adults where I got like sexually abused or anything. But me and like other little kids in the community where we were like alone outside by ourselves, I know we did things that we did
Experimented.
adult things. Yes, we experimented. And of course we never told our parents because we were alone. We weren't going to tell on ourselves.
Mhm.
So I know I did that. That was when I was 4 or 5 years old. It happened like 3, 4 times, I think, and then it just stopped. So I don't know, does that happen a lot in my community or does it still happen? I don't know. I just know it happened with me and several of the kids in my community when we were the same age. So that
Okay.
was, yeah, now looking back, I'm like, I am, I would be scared if I were planning on raising my kids there. So if I were to talk to those parents, I would just tell them to maybe pay a little bit more attention to what their kids are doing or how they're acting.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's just simple conversations too. And I feel like
mhm.
based on what we've talked about so far, a lot of it is probably just that seeking affection, just seeking
Yeah.
connection, and you're not getting that, and so you're turning to your peers to fill that gap and to make you feel that love and affection. But that's just my
Yeah.
outsider's perspective. What was your knowledge about pregnancy and childbirth? Because I'm assuming with you guys it was probably home births with an Amish midwife.
Mhm. Most of it, yeah. So I was never involved in that. When I was, I think, 8 years old, me and my brother found a book about births that my mom had. We found it, we went through it, and we figured out how it all works and stuff. Well, we figured out where the baby is because before that we always just thought the baby like was somehow appeared in the house or something. Like we just assumed the baby all of a sudden magically appeared in the house. So I remember specifically when one of my younger brothers was born, I was, I think, 5 years old, and they would always have us go to the neighbors or something while the baby was born because we couldn't be home. So they were sending us off to the neighbors for the neighbor to take care of us. And I was like, they were sending us all. And mom and dad were staying home. So I was like, they're having a baby. And we looked all over the house for that baby because we were like, we're going to find it before we leave.
Oh my
We looked
gosh.
all over for that baby before we left. And we left, we came back and they had a baby. And I was like, I don't know where they hid it. Maybe they hid it out in the barn because we only looked in the house. So I didn't know that until I was 8. Then we found that book and I was like, oh, the baby is in the mom. And then I didn't really think more about it until I was like 11. One time I was sitting in the bathtub Saturday evening. I was taking a bath and I was starting to think about it. And I was like, how does that baby get out? Like, how does that baby get out? I was like, do they cut the mom open? Like, how does that work? And but I was like, they wouldn't cut her open because, like, way back in the days of the Indians and Native Americans, like, they didn't have things to, like, the mom would just die.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I wonder. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I found the book again. I got my hands on that book again. And it showed a picture of a mom laying on her back in a hospital. And I was like, oh my goodness, how does that come out? Like, how does it come out of there? So
Yeah.
I knew that, then I just didn't know all the magic of how it happens and stuff. But I didn't know about the cycle. I knew if you got your cycle, you aren't pregnant. I figured that out when I was, I think, 14. I knew that if you got your cycle, you weren't pregnant. But I didn't know how you got, or I didn't know, like, I knew how you got pregnant. I figured that out because I read so many books. Like, I read so many smart books that I wasn't supposed to,
Oh
but it taught me
no.
about my anatomy. it taught me something. It also did damage, but it taught me something. So I learned how you got pregnant, but I didn't realize that you couldn't just get pregnant at any time of the month
Yeah.
until I read a book called After the Night by Linda Howard, and they had like unprotected sex, and the guy was teasing the woman about, oh, she's going to be pregnant because they didn't use protection. And then the woman was like, no, it's the wrong time of the month. And it's like she ran to her calendar and looked, and Sag was relieved because she was a week off from getting her cycle. And I was like, oh, so if you're a week away from getting your cycle, you can't get pregnant. So I knew that. I still didn't know when you could get pregnant. So I didn't
Yeah.
figure that out until long after I left the Amish, and I figured or found out what cycle tracking is, and ovulation,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Now I know it all, but back then I knew nothing. I was figuring it out with my smut books and sneak little books that mom had for childbirth. So
How did you get your hands on smut books?
So we would sometimes go to the library. We have a town, the closest town was 7 miles away. They had a tiny little library, and I loved reading books. And my parents love reading books too. So sometimes, very rarely, maybe twice a year, me and mom would get to go to town because the kids can't go to town without their parents. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are, as long as you're not baptized, you can't go to town without your parents. So me and mom would sometimes go to town, and we would go to the library, and they had a shelf of free books that you could just take and you didn't have to return. And so I would it would be cold, so we would have our shawl on, like our shawl, cloak, whatever, and our coat with pockets. So I would usually stick several books in my coat pockets and then wrap my shawl around so mom couldn't see. And that's how I got most of them home. So
That is so funny, especially because you were a very devout Amish girl, wanted to follow all the rules, but
mhm.
at the same time, you're like, let's learn about sex though in these books.
Yes. I remember the first time I read a smut book like that, I was so astounded. I felt so uncomfortable. I couldn't get over it. I threw the book away. I couldn't get over it. And then I found another one, and I was like, well, it only has a couple scenes in it. And my brother loved reading too. My older brother loved reading too, but I didn't want him knowing about it. So
Yeah.
I would scribble out several words. And I did that for one book. He read it. And then I had another book that had one scene in it, and I didn't want him to read about it. So I snuck up during the day and was scribbling out words. And all of a sudden the door opened and mom was there, and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, and then she grabbed the book and looked, and she went and burned it.
Oh my gosh. That is
I'm not done. I never read the whole book, so I don't know the ending of that book to this day. That's
so okay.
I can't remember what it's called
I
either,
love that
so.
little snippet of your personality of this juxtaposition of these two worlds colliding. So when you were 18, they're pressuring you to get baptized, and that's when you realized I have to get away. Can you explain why you didn't want to get baptized and what the significance would be if you were baptized and then left?
Okay, if you get baptized, you promise to follow all the rules, and if you don't follow them all, you get shunned, which I didn't know. I didn't know the full extent of getting shunned when I was Amish. I just knew it was a bad thing, and I had seen how shunned people got treated at church. They were completely ignored. Nobody would talk to them. You can't eat at the same table as them. You can't eat any food that they made. They can't give you anything. It's a nightmare if you're in a small community with no outside you have no outside. The small community is all you have. And everybody, even people in Minnesota in the community would treat you like that because you're shunned. They would not communicate with you. So I knew I didn't want to get shunned ever. And so I was expected to join church. There were several things going on that spring. In March of that spring, I left in April. So in March, me and my boyfriend of 10 months finally broke up. I was so happy about that. I was just so happy. We broke up. So of course I was happy, but I was also looked at as you guys broke up? Like, why? Like, and it's not something that they would come on and ask you. They just kind of look at you weird, like everybody in the community would. Or everybody your age, because everybody in the community, it's not like it's supposed to be a secret that you're dating. So I had just broken up with him. I was very happy about that. I was a school teacher from the age of 15 to 18. I did 3 terms of school teaching, and I loved it. It was my favorite part of my teenage years to this day. I would not mind being an Amish school teacher. Except I would have to be Amish. I love teaching. But I was a school teacher, and I wanted to be a school teacher the next term. Their school terms, whatever that's called, like the school year.
Semester?
Yeah, semester ends in April and starts at the last week. Ends usually the first week of April, starts the last week of August. So first week of April, school term ended, and I wanted to be a teacher again in August, but I was getting paid $12 a day, and the church was refusing to up my price to pay me more. And Dad was like, "We can't." I was driving 8 miles a day with horse and buggy to get to and from school, and Dad was like, "We can't afford to run a horse 8 miles a day for $12." So he was like, "Well, you won't be going back." I had no say in the matter. "You won't be going back to that school. You're gonna be working on a sawmill." He runs a sawmill, a tie and grade lumber sawmill. And I didn't mind working on the sawmill every now and then. I didn't mind putting in a day at the sawmill, so it was a lot of hard work. It was very dirty work, and I didn't mind it, but I definitely did not love it because he got so dirty, and I was like a clean freak. So when he was like, "You're gonna be working on the sawmill like all the time," I was like, I couldn't say something. I couldn't say anything because I don't have a say about it. And I was a goody two shoes, so I did anything my parents asked of me to try and get them to love me more, I guess. And so I didn't say anything. I was just like, okay. But when he said that, I started thinking, and I was like, I really, really don't want to work on the sawmill. But I didn't have the nerve to just tell him that because he wouldn't care. And then they were expecting me to join the church, to get baptized, because all the other kids in the community my age, which I think was like 5 of us, 5 others my age, were getting baptized. There's no secret that they were all getting baptized. And so they were like, "Are you going to get baptized with us?" Because they only baptize kids once a year. And I was like, "Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm getting baptized with you." And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, I don't want this. I just don't want this. I don't want to work on the sawmill. I don't want to get baptized. Like, I don't like this anymore. And then one day, Mom, so they wear a cape. So this outfit is not complete. For Sundays, and during the winter, they wear capes. The women wear capes. And it's like a triangle, pins on in the middle in the back of your dress, and then comes in 2 pieces and sticks down the front right here. And then you put it in pleats here, and you usually put like I know a lot of them use a piece of yarn and just tie it around your neck to like stuff the pleats in. And I loved using a white band like this and just pinning it at the front because it didn't feel like you were choking yourself as much. It didn't feel as bad. But Mom, apparently the church didn't like when you use white bands like this. And Mom was totally fine with it. I used it my whole life up until I was 18 years old, up until that spring. I didn't realize the church had such an issue with it, but Mom came up to me and she was like, "When you get baptized, you can't use that anymore. You should use a piece of yarn." And I said nothing. I did not make a sound outwards, but inwards, I was just like, that is enough. This is too much. The stupid thing. And I can't have it. I can't join the church. There is no way I'm joining the church. I'm not willing to do that. But I didn't tell anybody that because that would have been just outrageous. So instead, I slowly started. I was like, well, I mean, I can't commit suicide. I know I don't want that because I want to live. But the only other option was leaving the Amish. And I'm like, leaving the Amish is just wrong. That's wrong. I'm going to hell if I do that. But finally, I was like, I'll leave the Amish, and then if I want to, I can always come back. Like, I can always come back and be Amish if I don't like it or if I still think it's wrong. So I plotted. I didn't tell a single person. I decided to leave the Amish on April. I have to look at the calendar always to remember this. I left on a Monday night, April of 2021. On a Monday night, it was April 18, 19, or 20. I can't specifically remember because it was over midnight, so I always get it mixed up. So if whatever day, whichever one of those days was Monday in April of 2021 is when I left, and I snuck out of the house. I had my suitcase on wheels. I used a suitcase that my parents never used. I just found one in the attic that they never used because I didn't want to steal something that they used or take something that they used a lot because I didn't want to have to give it back. So I took a suitcase on wheels, a little red one with a handle that you could pull. And that's a very uncommon suitcase for the Amish, and that's why they didn't use it. And I packed all my stuff in there that I wanted to take along because I knew after I left, they would not let me have anything else. Like, they wouldn't let me come back and get any of my, like, sentimental stuff. And it was, although it was April, we had gotten snow that day. I waited until 11:30 that evening because my parents would usually go to bed around 10:30 or 11. And I knew I had to leave within the first hour after they fell asleep because that is when they always slept most soundly. And then after that, their sleep would get a little lighter and they would wake up easier. And my parents wake up very easy, or my mom does at least. Waited until 11:30. I could hear them snoring. They were downstairs, but I could like hear them snoring if I listened. And then I had left my shoes downstairs outside. I had greased all the door hinges with vegetable oil before so they don't creak. I had figured out which stairs creak and which don't. I put everything in my suitcase, and because it was cold, I needed a coat or something, but I didn't want to take a coat because they make their own coats, and it's pretty hard to make them. They're very high quality. So I didn't want to have to take a coat when one of my younger siblings could use that after I left. So instead, I used one of those big 90 by 90 inch fleece blankets that I had gotten as a gift when I was a school teacher. So I used that because it was mine. I used that as a shawl, and I used a scarf that I had gotten as a gift. And like and I had this dress on, this cap. I used all my stuff so I didn't have to take any of what could be considered theirs. And I had the sentimental stuff that I had packed into the suitcase was all stuff I had been gifted. It was like a wooden thing I'd gotten in for Christmas. It was to like hang on the wall and hold a hairbrush. I had some handkerchiefs with my name on it, like my little songbook that you get when you turn 16 and a half. Some sentimental stuff. I had packed it into the suitcase and I snuck out of my room. It took me at least 5 minutes just to make it down the stairs. I was that careful. And after I was down the stairs, I couldn't use any light. So I had to sneak by light of whatever was left outside or whatever came in through the windows, sneak all through the length of the kitchen and out the back door. And the back door still had its screen, or we had put the screen door on. So they have like a screen door that like flapped shut. It doesn't have a latch or anything. So it's like a little rattly because you have all the screens and netting and stuff. So I was very careful. It took me so long to get through that door. But after I was through that door, I was good. I put my shoes on. I thought I was good. I put my shoes on. I got outside and the dogs were there. We had 2 farm dogs. And they started barking.
No.
I was so afraid they would wake up mom and dad. I took off and I ran as fast as I could down the driveway until I got to our round hay bales that were sitting there, and I hid behind them, made sure the light didn't come on in the house because I knew if mom woke up, she would have a light and she would come out and look, see what's wrong. Waited for a while there until I made sure the lights weren't on, and then after I figured it would be good, I left the hay bales and I went down out the driveway and up the road. It was 2 miles of gravel road and 2 miles of paved road that I walked to get to the place I stayed at. And it was at a non-Amish friend's house. They didn't know I was coming, but they knew me. They still know my parents and everything to this day. And the guy was he hauled logs, like he hauls logs for my dad's sawmill. So he had a semi with a semi cab with a sleeper, and he had left it unlocked. So I got there at around 1:30, I think. I just climbed into the semi sleeper, curled up with my blanket, and went to sleep. And I had taken along a self winding watch. I don't know where that watch is. I think I lost it at some point after I left the Amish. But I had taken that along, and so I could keep track of my time. And I slept on and off. There were mice in the cabs that were running over me and stuff. So I slept on and off until around 6:30, and it started getting light. And at around 7 o'clock, I was like, okay, let me go in and try and face these people. So I went in to the back door. The back door has like a shop attached. Went in there and just stood there and waited until they came out the back door, and they saw me and they were like, "Did you run away?" I was like,
They knew immediately?
knew. And they were like, they knew I was going to run away someday. And they helped me. And my mom and dad came that afternoon. They came to try and talk me into going back. They talked at me for 2.5 hours, but I was in so much stress and like I was so like tense that I don't remember much about that conversation to this day. There's only a couple things I remember about that conversation, but they tried so hard to get me to go back, and I would just stand there and nod and shrug, and like those are my responses. I don't think I ever talked. So
They
that
had,
was
wow. So you had to face them immediately.
Yep. I had my hair down already, and they of course made sure to ask me why my hair needed to be down.
Okay, so what was it that made you feel like you could trust this family? Because people always ask, how can I help someone if I don't know that they want to leave or they don't know that they want to leave yet? How do I be that
Yeah.
person, that safe haven? What was it that made you trust them to sleep at their
Uh,
house,
I,
basically?
we had known them for ever since I was 6 years old. So for 12 years, we had known them already. And I would have trusted a lot of people to help me because I was 18, so I was legally old enough, so they didn't have like a legal reason to send me back.
Sure.
But I trusted them because I knew that as much as they liked my parents, or at least wanted to help my parents, they also liked us kids and wanted to help us kids. Like they weren't just friends with my parents. They were friends with us kids. They were the one non-Amish family, the only non-Amish family that we knew that were friends with us kids too, and not just the parents. Like I used to bake cinnamon rolls and stuff and give it to these people, cookies, stuff like that. I used to bake them goods and give it to them as a treat. And I figured they would tell my parents and they would like stick up to my parents because obviously he did work for my dad. So I knew it would be that side, but I also knew they wouldn't ask me to go back. Like they would take me in and take care of me until I decided what I wanted to do. Like they wouldn't be like, okay, you got to go back because that's what your parents want. I knew they would look at what my parents wanted, but they would prioritize the decision I made instead of being like, your parents want you back, we're going to send you back. Instead, they would be like, okay, your parents want you back. What do you want? I'm like, well, I don't want to go back. And they're like, okay, understood. You're not going back.
Yeah.
And so it's just that I don't think when we leave the Amish, I don't think we necessarily care if someone is planning on supporting us, or I didn't care if they were planning on supporting me or not. I had no clue how I was going to support myself. I had $24. I had no non-Amish clothes, no nothing. And I didn't care if they were going to support me or not. They didn't, because I didn't have to, because my older brother had left the Amish as well. I didn't care if they would support me or not. All I cared was that I had a place that was not Amish that I could stay at until I could call someone. Like I had family. I have a lot of aunts and uncles that have left the Amish. And even if I didn't have them, I know other people that have left the Amish, like distant people that the minute they hear that I've left the Amish, they would make sure they can come help me. Fortunately enough, I had my older brother. So they didn't have to. So I could just go directly to him and he helped me. But if I wouldn't have had him, I would have found someone who would have been glad to help me.
That's
because
so great.
that's the case in most ex-Amish. If you are 18 when you leave, you are almost guaranteed to be able to find an ex-Amish person somewhere that will help you, like help you get on your feet. Because if you're 18, there's no legal ties to your parents. Like your parents can't do anything, and you are responsible for what you do.
How long before did your brother leave?
A year, 14 months before I left, he
So
had left. And
even
when he left,
he was acclimating. He was still figuring out
oh
life
yes,
too.
yeah, very much. I look back and I'm like, he did a good job. To think that that it had been longer since he had left, because 14 months after I left the Amish, I would have been in no place to help anybody with anything. Because the first year after I left the Amish was just, oh, it was one stumbling block after the other. And it was never ending, like just you were falling all the time trying to get back on your feet.
Yeah, give us some examples of some of those really difficult moments.
So the hardest one for me was the first 2 months after I left the Amish. Obviously, you don't have an ID. I didn't have my social security number, anything. I didn't have my birth certificate. I had a distant cousin who took me to the courthouse. When I left the Amish, I went and moved to the county where I was born. So that made it a lot easier. I went to the courthouse. I got my birth certificate. That's really simple for if you know your parents' information, everything. That's pretty simple. So I went, got there, got my birth certificate. After I had that, the next step I needed to do was get my social security. That was so much harder. That is the stuff, and it was like not long after COVID. So the social
Mhm.
security offices weren't open. You had to do it all online, and I didn't have a credit card. So I was constantly borrowing people's cards and then paying them in cash because I was getting paid to nanny I was a live-in nanny for a distant cousin because she was on bed rest for the first 2 months. So I was always using her card to pay for stuff and then paying her in cash. The credit or the social security card, I didn't realize that I just needed to file for a lost card because I still had my social security number. I just didn't know what it was, and I didn't have it with me because my parents had it. So I should have just filed for a lost social security card. Instead, I filed for a new one. And I put in my information, my parents' information, like their birth places, birth dates, everything. All the information I had, I put in. And it asked for my number. And I said, I don't have my number. So I just sent it in to file for a new social security number. And I thank God to this day, the social security company sent that form back and were like, you need more documents. But before they sent it back, they wrote my social security number on it.
No,
They
they
wrote my social
didn't.
security number on it. That was such a big help. I remember I got that back and I was like, I can't believe they wrote that on there. This is so great. So, I went and filed and said I lost my social security card. So I have right now. I only have one because I got married and I had to get a new one. But for a while there, I had after I turned 21, my parents gave me my social security card. So for a while there, I had two social security cards. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
filed for a lost one. They sent me the card out. Finally, that was I left in April. It seemed like a long time. It was only 2 months, like 10 weeks. It wasn't that long. But it seemed like a long time because I had tried so many different things and it wasn't working. So they sent me the social security card. And this whole time, I can't drive because I don't have a license. I don't know how to drive. So anytime I wanted to go anywhere, I had to call someone and ask for a ride. And in the meantime, my phone plan, you have to pay for a phone plan. My brother had put me on Straight Talk. So had to go to Walmart once a month and get my $55 Straight Talk card so I could refill my phone plan so it would work. And the first month, I didn't know that you had to refill it. And one morning I got up, I wanted to send a text. No texts were sending. I had Wi-Fi, I had good service. Texts just weren't sending. I couldn't call people. And I was talking to my cousin that I was living with, and I was like, my phone isn't working. It doesn't work. And she's like, well, did you refill it? And I was like, what do you mean, did I refill it? And she's like, you have to have a card. You have to refill your service. And I was like, I don't know, how do you do that? And she's like, you have to go to Walmart and buy a card, a straight talk card, $55. I had told her what kind of phone plan I had. And you have to put that in there. And so I went and I bought it and I followed all the instructions on the back of the card. And it said, hold your buttons until you see the Apple device. And I was so scared, but I did it. I followed their instructions. I saw the Apple device. My phone was unresponsive. And I was like, oh crap, this phone is gone. I ruined it. I need a new phone. And then it came back and it worked again. So what was that? I got over that. After I got my social security card in July, I was then ready to go. I needed an envelope with my address on it because nobody was sending me mail because I was not anywhere in a system. So my sister-in-law sent me a letter she wasn't my sister-in-law yet, my brother's girlfriend sent me a letter. So I have an envelope with my address on it to take it to the DMV. I got my permit, did my permit test. So I got my permit and it was so easy. I got it on the first try. Then came the driving test. I did it 6 times. The 7th time I passed my driving test.
Oh,
When I went
no.
into my driving test, I didn't know. I knew red meant stop and green meant go, and that was all I knew. I did not know what yield signs meant. I did not know what yield on green meant. So I was failing this thing left and right. I didn't know how to drive. It was bad, but I got it. I got my license in October. So from July to October, I was trying to learn how to drive to get my license. After I got my license, it was a little easier, but then I needed a vehicle.
Yeah.
And in those 6 months since leaving the Amish, I had saved up, was paying rent. I was paying I think $300 a month in rent and only working when people could give me a ride. I was cleaning houses, so I had to work when people could give me a ride. And with all of that, I had only saved up $500. I had so little money. And so my boyfriend at the time gave me $1,000. I went and bought a vehicle and paid it off. I got I think a $2,500 Chevy Equinox, just a cheap one at a dealership. I drove it no problems for about 2 months, I'd say. And we lived out in the country. It was winter, so it was icy, and I drove it, went around the corner too fast, went into the ditch, and it worked fine. So I kept driving it. I was like, well, nothing went wrong. And then a couple weeks after that happened, I was about an hour and 15 minutes from home visiting my grandparents, and I heard the fan ran kind of loud. So I went in front to check it out under the hood, and I saw that there was a lot of dirt stuck up in the bottom of the vehicle from when I had gone into the ditch. So I kicked it all out. And that dirt was what was saving my vehicle, because after I kicked it out, it had it was broken. It was pushed in. So it rubbed the belt against the coolant tank. And the coolant, within 3 miles of leaving my grandparents' house, it was Thanksgiving, the evening before Thanksgiving. The coolant tank was empty. Somebody close by, I had stopped right across the house from some people we didn't know. I went in, knocked on their door, asked if they could help. They came out, filled up my coolant tank, and I drove slowly for about a mile, and it was empty again. I was like, I have no clue what's happening.
Oh, no.
So we left the vehicle there. My boyfriend came and got me, took me home. So the vehicle was sitting there for the next 2 or so weeks, and I was flat out of money. I had no money. I think I had $97 in my bank account, and my phone plan needed to be paid. I was out of money, and I didn't have a vehicle to go to work. So I was like, okay, I need a vehicle. Let me see if I could go to a dealership, get a loan, and get maybe the cheapest vehicle they have. So I went to a Ford dealership. It was the middle of the winter in Minnesota. I got a $10,000 loan. My boyfriend's older sister, who had a good credit score, because I didn't have a credit score either.
I was going to say, how did you do that?
So my boyfriend's older sister co-signed. I got a $7,000 loan from the dealership, and my boyfriend's sister loaned me $3,000. So they trusted me pretty far.
Wow.
And I got the car. It was a Ford Focus, 2014 Ford Focus, in the middle of winter in Minnesota. The worst decision you could make. And I got that thing stuck. In the next 6 weeks, I got that thing stuck at least 3 times. I only had it for 6 weeks because exactly 6 weeks on the day after I drove that thing out of the dealership, I was sitting at a red light behind another vehicle, and the person behind me didn't stop. Rear-ended me, ran me into the next vehicle, completely totaled the vehicle, which was the best thing. The best thing at the time that could have happened to me financially, because I had Allstate insurance and they were really good, and they paid me more than I owed on the car.
Whoa.
So they paid me. I paid the bank and my boyfriend's sister, and I still had a little bit of money left over. I think I still had like $1,500 left over. And at that same time, I got a good job, like a really good job. I got a nannying job, a full-time nannying job that paid really good. So I was making a little bit more money. I was able to pay $2,500 to one of my friends to get a car. By then I was just driving friends' vehicles until I could get a car. That happened towards the end of February is when my car got totaled. And until the beginning of April, when insurance paid me, I was just driving my friends' vehicles around. And by the beginning of April, it was like spring in Minnesota, so there was no more snow, it was beautiful. You didn't have to worry about getting a car with good tires and stuff. So one of my other ex-Amish friends had found a car in a junkyard, and it worked perfectly. A 2005 Chevy Cobalt worked perfectly. And he was like, I'll sell it to you for $2,500. And he did. I bought it, and it ran so beautifully. I drove that thing for over a year, and then it needed a new motor mount and stuff. I was still kind of broke. So struggled so much. And so I sold it on Facebook Marketplace and got a little bit of a newer car, and I'm still driving that to this day.
Oh,
I love
my
it. It's a 2007 vehicle, but it's fancy compared to that 2005 vehicle I was driving, and I love that car. I am very fussy about who drives that car.
Oh my gosh. Just thing after thing after thing.
Yeah, she was like, I can't get on my feet here. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. Did you ever start to feel like it's because I left the Amish, it's because I'm sinning, it's because I did all these things wrong?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And my parents made sure to feed into that. They were like, yeah, like, maybe if you wouldn't have left the Amish, God would be with you. God would bless you. And I was a little too stubborn.
You're like, well, maybe if you taught me about cars and driving, and if you would have helped me be more prepared.
Oh my gosh. If I would have had the support of my parents, I would have been unstoppable. But
Yeah. So we're just about at the end here, and I want to keep talking to you. Would you be interested in doing a live where we can go more into starting your business and your YouTube channel and everything, and also meeting your husband?
yeah, I would love doing a live. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So just to kind of button up this episode, can you just talk about well, I know you weren't baptized, so you weren't forcibly shunned, but a little bit about how your parents treated you before we sign off here today.
How they treat me today is a little different than how they treated me when I first left. When I first left, they would still talk to me. They would write me letters all the time, and they would still talk to my older brother. They would write him letters. Now they don't talk to us. They don't respond to any letters. We can't visit them, anything. And the reason for that is because a little over a year ago, one of my younger brothers left the Amish, and we had visited 2 weeks before he left. Me and my husband had been there to visit, and they're convinced that that's why he left. We had no clue he was planning on leaving. We didn't know anything about that, but they're convinced that's why he left. And so after he left, Dad called, and he never calls us. He called and was like, hey, we're not going to write you any more letters. You're not allowed to come home and visit. None of that stuff. So, and my brother, to button it all up, went back home 2 months later. He wanted to go back to the Amish, and he did. And that that didn't change anything. My parents still stood with that rule. So we are basically as shunned as they can shun us. Now, my younger sister, she's 18 months younger, she got married this spring. She and her husband welcome us at any time to come and visit. So that's amazing. We love visiting them. But as far as my parents, we can't visit them. We can't see our siblings. They do not respond to our letters.
That's so frustrating, especially because your channel almost seems pro-Amish, like making all of
Yeah.
these
Mhm.
goods and showing people how to do things the way that
Yeah.
you did them. You're still in your Amish attire and you're not speaking badly about the
Mhm.
Amish, and they still just won't.
Yeah. They still don't care. They're
Oh
Amish,
man.
so
Yeah.
the
Oh,
hardest
that's so
thing, I'd say the
frustrating.
hardest thing about that, about us not being able to visit is not being able to see my parents. It is not being able to see my siblings. I
Yeah, you
don't get
raised
to see
them.
them grow up. I raised them, then all of a sudden I don't get to see them anymore. They know who I am, but they don't know who I am as a person because they don't get to know me. So that's the hardest part, but it will all work out in the
Yeah.
end. It will all work out. They will grow up, and if they want to know me, they can. If they don't, then it is sad, but we all make our own choices.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're happy and thriving since you left. It
Yes,
doesn't seem
I
like that
am.
was a fit for your personality.
No, okay. When I left, my personality when I was Amish versus now is day and night. When I was Amish, I was so suppressed. I was made fun of my whole life for various things. I haven't grown. I'm 5'7", and I was 5'7" at 12 years old. I haven't grown an inch since I was 12 years old. So I was always gangly and tall, and I was made fun of for that. I was called a Holstein cow because Holstein cows have long legs. I was called a Holstein cow, and because of my long teeth in the front here, I was called a gopher. I was always made fun of for things, and it suppressed me. Like, that does so much damage to a person. And so when I left the Amish, I started voicing my opinion. I was such a different person. And I remember the first time I went back to visit after I had left, I was so happy because I was happy with my life. And I was like laughing a lot and stuff. And after I left, my older brother had gone back to visit as well. And they told him that I act like I'm on drugs. So,
Just having normal human emotions that you weren't allowed to express before is
because I
acting like
had
you're on drugs.
emotions. So that was enough to make me be like, okay, they just don't realize who I am. They have no clue who I am. They know who I
Yeah.
was, but they have no clue who I am now. So,
Yeah. Well, their loss.
yeah, they're lost.
Tell people where they can find you and support you across all social media platforms.
Lovina_Thuk. I am on pretty much all platforms. I'm on Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter or X, YouTube. Obviously, I'm on Lovina_Thuk. I have my own website, which is socialsbylovina.com. I think that's it. And on my website, I have all my socials linked. I have an email there if you guys want to reach out. Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. If you go to Google and search up Lovina Thuk, I pop up. And it's all because of my audience that's possible. Because without them, I would be just another person on the internet trying to make videos. So,
Yes, I love how successful you've been, and I'm excited to talk
thank
about that
you.
further when we go live. So,
Yes.
what is your Linda Listen moment for this episode?
If I were to talk, Linda, if I were talking to somebody back in my community, I would say, if I were to talk to my parents specifically, I would say listen to the other point of view because you have only ever lived one point of view. So listen to the other one and do not believe that just because you're Amish and you have this certain view on a non-Amish life, that is how every non-Amish person lives. Your life is not all that grand. Oh my goodness. Yeah, they
Sassy, I love it. Well, I think that's a really great point because also, I'm sure they don't want to be categorized as, well, all Amish live this way. So you have
I
to be able to
know.
see the opposite point of
Uh-huh.
view, right? I'm sure they'll be like, well, not all Amish this.
Yeah, they hate it when they get categorized in like Amish, all Amish do this or all Amish do that, but they do it with the world. Like
Yeah.
they see one drug addict and they're like, oh, the whole world is a drug addict. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it just, sometimes it hurts. If you sit and think about it, I'm like, it hurts that I'm living a very clean, healthy lifestyle. And they just think I'm out here being the slum of the earth. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I try not to think about it, but if I do, it gets into a very hurtful place.
I understand that. It's hard when you're in a high control group and you've been programmed in
Mhm.
tunnel vision to only see things a certain way. It's very black and white thinking.
Yes.
Every single group always shuns the outsider or makes the people who are still in not trust them or believe anything that they say. They wouldn't know. They're led by
Yeah.
Satan. They're sinning. Because if they were to listen to the outsiders, people would probably start to open their minds and their perspectives and
Mhm.
slowly leave, and they don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to control it, otherwise they don't have it. So,
Yep, control the narrative. Well, this has been so
mhm.
great, Lovina. Thank you so much for
Yes.
coming on and sharing. This has been awesome.
You're very welcome. This has been so, I love just getting online and talking to people. So, this
Yeah,
has
you're
been a
great
lot
at
of
it.
fun.
I
Thank
feel like we
you.
could go on for hours, and so I'm looking forward to the
Yeah, I
live.
think we could.
And maybe we can get your husband on too, and maybe we could do a live with both of you. I don't know.
Yes.
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah. I'm going to talk to my husband about it. I know he's been on my uncle's podcast and he always has really good talking points. So I'll see.
Yeah,
He is
see what he
definitely
thinks.
not as much of a social media person as I am, but he is a great talker. So, like,
Yeah,
he's good at his talking points. So,
perfect. Any other final thoughts before we go?
I don't think so, except if you just left the Amish and you're watching this. I just had a younger brother who left the Amish and I had forgotten how hard it can be. So if you just left the Amish and you're watching this, the world doesn't hate you. That's something that you were probably conditioned to think when you were Amish. But no, we actually want to help you. We've just gotten past what you're experiencing right now. So we are also just humans and we don't always think of other people.
Everyone's
So
just doing the
if you
best they
need help,
can.
yeah. If you need help, make sure to talk to people because we are open-minded now, even if we
Yeah,
were not when we were Amish. So
yeah, I agree. Well, if you guys are watching to the end, thank you so much for making it here. Leaving those words of encouragement for Lovina means so much to our guests and obviously boosts the algorithm and helps the channel. Liking, sharing, commenting, all of those things are the best way to support the show. If you want to support further, we have channel memberships now where you can get YouTube specific perks. I've been seeing those memberships grow and I'm so excited to build that community here. If you would prefer to do something over on Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. We have a clips channel with shorter versions of our guest stories. If you just want little snippets of each one, you can go check that out. And if you like this video, guys, we have so many incredible Amish videos I'll link to here. We have an entire playlist. We have talking to Amish Mennonite from Swartzentruber, from Black Bumper Mennonite. I mean, the list goes on and on. Definitely check that out if you like this video. And hit that bell and subscribe so you don't miss the live with Lovina when we come back. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.